Andrea and I both have had the unfortunate experience of having our moms diagnosed with breast cancer. So this is a topic that is very near and dear to not only us, but our Lifetime Moms family. So we're here to talk to Dr. Love about her Army of Women initiative. She's the president of the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation and the author of the Dr. Susan Love Breast Book. And we're thrilled to be here to hear about the Army of Women and how all of us can help change and eradicate breast cancer once and for all.
Well, thank you very much. It's really great to be here, and it's great to be working with Lifetime. We've enjoyed it very much at the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation, and we're very excited about the partnership because, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and what really has struck me is how, in some ways, although it looks like we've made a lot of progress and we've certainly raised a lot of money, we still don't know what the cause of breast cancer is or how to prevent it. And we're still doing the same treatments. And when you think about cancer of the cervix, for example, when I started out 30 years ago, if you had an abnormal pap smear, you had a total hysterectomy. You lost your fertility. That was it. And then we figured out you could do something local, and then we figured out it was a virus, and now we know it's a vaccine. So in 20 years, we went from not knowing what we were doing and cutting off normal body parts for prevention to having a vaccine. And yet, when's the last time you saw a march for cancer of the cervix or a ribbon? Not.
Right.
No, so why? Well, I think in some ways we're victims of our own success. We've raised so much money and we've just given it to the scientists and said, here, have a good time and do whatever you want. And they've done a lot of research on rats and mice, but rats and mice don't get breast cancer. And so most of it doesn't translate very well. And when I said to them, why don't you do the research in women? They said, because women are too messy. We can't control them. We can't control what they eat, what they do. They get pregnant, they don't get pregnant. And rats, we can control everything, even their genes. And it's pretty science. And I said, well, that's great, but you know, rats don't get breast cancer. We have to give it to them to study it in them. And it doesn't always translate. And they said, well, we don't know how to get women anyway. And I said, that I know how to do. So we're recruiting 1 million women who are willing to participate in research. So you're not signing up for a study at armyofwomen.org. You are signing up to hear about studies. It's an email list, and researchers come to us with their studies, and we help them sort them out, and then if we like it, we send it out to everybody in the Army, and if you fit and you want to do it, you RSVP, and if not, you don't. So it's a little bit like eHarmony. You don't have to date everybody that you can find out about. You get a choice. You get to opt in or opt out.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't fit you, you can send it to somebody else.
Right, absolutely. It's very powerful. And it closes studies so quickly so that we're getting closer to finding some more valuable information out quicker.
Exactly. I mean, we were just talking right before we started about a study we did in New York where the researcher was looking for different genes for breast cancer and was looking particularly for people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent and their families and having them spit in a cup, and had been going to, Hadassah meetings and synagogues and all kinds of things and having a terrible time. We put it out in the Army, and within a week we got them everybody they needed, and they closed the study. Now the exciting thing about that is then you can find the answer and move on to the next thing. I mean, it may work, it may not work, but you're not spending all your time looking for people. So if we're going to get the answers, we've got to be able to make this process faster, and not just research for the sake of research, but research for the sake of finding out what causes breast cancer.
Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. What an opportunity for women to get involved in a different way besides just going on a run or wearing the pink ribbon
Right.
or dressing in pink. You actually feel like you're making a huge difference, and it's not such a taxing thing on you as
And it
a
doesn't
woman.
cost any
It
money.
doesn't cost anything. Yeah.
And as you
Yeah.
said, it's an opt-in or opt-out. So if you receive an email and it fits your criteria and
Right.
you're willing to participate, you go ahead and participate. If you don't, perhaps you know a friend or a sister you'd like to pass it on to and spread the word. It's the power in the number, and the
Yeah.
social media environment is
And
right
easy
for
as
this.
an email. So.
Yeah. No, we have one study that we've been recruiting for. We recruited for it, and now they've increased it, where they're looking for women who are breastfeeding. So it's very, very appropriate for this audience. And they think they have a marker in breast milk that might predict who's going to be at higher risk for breast cancer later on. But they're testing it out. And they first wanted 200 women. Well, we put it out to the Army of Women. Then they send you a kit. You put some breast milk in the kit. You ship it back. That's it.
So simple.
Fill out a questionnaire. And we got everybody they needed. And then they said, well, that was so easy. We're going to make the study bigger. Now we want more people. And so we're continuing to recruit for that study. And people can go on our the website of armyofwomen.org and sign up, and then see the list of studies and sign up for that. So there are studies, lots of different kinds of ways you can do it. Some of them you need to be in the town, might be doing yoga or a special diet or something. Other ones, we just did one yesterday. We did a webinar, one of our researchers who did a study on grapefruits and breast cancer. And it turns out, I didn't know this, that people who eat grapefruit, at least in the preliminary study, makes their estrogen levels go way up. Within 8 hours of eating a quarter of a grapefruit, your estrogen level goes up. So if you're also taking estrogen, it would go up even more.
Wow.
And so the question is, do people who eat grapefruit have a higher risk of breast cancer? And now we're going to help her do the next study to finally answer it. But, who would have thought of that?
Absolutely right. Amazingly interesting. Very, very interesting. And we're here taking questions from you live with Dr. Love. So, Andra.
Yeah, so we are as Kim mentioned, we're very excited to have Dr. Love here. This is an amazing opportunity for all of you to ask your questions directly to Dr. Love. And we are focusing on motherhood and breast cancer, motherhood and pregnancy and breast cancer. And I have heard, take my question first, I've heard recently that there's actually some new research on breast cancer and pregnancy.
Right. This is very interesting on a number of fronts. So we always knew that the younger you are with your first pregnancy, the lower your risk, and the older you are, the higher your risk. And actually being old, I think it varies in the studies, but either over 40 or usually over 40, is worse than never being pregnant at all. Now, these are risk factors, and I was 40 when I had my daughter, so it just shows you how much attention I pay to all this. You're not doomed if you have a late pregnancy, but in general, we see this, and we didn't really have a good handle on it. And now, there's a researcher who's done a lot of work in rats and also looking at pregnancy-associated breast cancer, and found out that during pregnancy and for the next 5 years, you actually have a higher risk of getting breast cancer. And then the fact that you were pregnant makes you at lower risk. So it's complicated. But she then took that information from women and took it to the rats, and what she found is, once you start thinking about it, it's not so crazy. Think about what happens to your breast when you get pregnant. It goes from just hanging out to becoming a milk factory. I mean, it turns blood into milk. Pretty magical. And in order to do that, it needs hormones and growth factors and all these different changes that go on in the breast. So if you have any cells that are off or mutated, all those changes will egg them on. So that may be part of the increase with pregnancy. And then at the end of breastfeeding is what we call involution. It's when the breast tissue now cleans up, knocks out all those ducts that have been making milk, makes a whole new set, gets everything set for the next kid. It's like, cleaning out the nursery and then setting it up all over again, I guess. And again, lots of growth factors, immune system, stem cells, all kinds of things going on. And if you have any abnormal cells, they'll be egged on during that period. So during those periods, there's a higher risk. Now, the next step to this research, I've been working with her, is how can we take this from rats and see if it's true in women? Mm-hmm. So we're part of a grant she's just submitted so that we will recruit from the Army of Women, and we'll do core biopsies on women at different points as they've finished breastfeeding to see whether the changes in the tissue mimic those in the rats. And then we may do a study where we randomly give women something to try to prevent those changes and see if we can get rid of this pregnancy-associated breast cancer. So this is the excitement of the Army of Women, is that we can move things quickly, test them, find out if they're right or not right, and if they are right, do something about them, instead of having it just sit around and the researchers talk to each other and have a good time, but it never gets anywhere.
Powerful.
Great.
Very powerful.
Really interesting stuff. So we actually had a Twitter party yesterday with Lifetime Moms, and Army of Women contributed as well, and we wanted to get some of those questions to Dr. Love. So one of those was, how do you find doctors who specialize in breast cancer and not just cancer, besides searching on the internet?
Yeah, this is tricky. In the old days when I started, that general surgeons did breast surgery, and actually they said to me, "You'll never make a living as a breast surgeon." Obviously, that was wrong. But nowadays there are a lot of people who specialize in breast, and the best way is really to look at a breast center. So a lot of the larger hospitals have a breast center. It's not just mammography, but has a breast surgeon, somebody who really the majority of their practice is breast cancer, and they're not doing a gallbladder, a hernia, and then a breast biopsy. You really want somebody who's focused, because the treatment and the surgery for breast cancer has become so complicated now, depending on the kind and all these different things, that a general surgeon can't really keep up with it in the appropriate way. And most academic medical centers, the ones that are associated with a university, will have specialists. And many other large hospitals will as well. But that's what you want to say. What percentage of your practice is breast? And it should be a good 75%.
Excellent
Great,
information.
great. Thank you. Well, let's take a question from somebody who's online right now. Rebecca, who wants to know what Dr. Love thinks about preventative measures more in line with personal care products and other exposures to chemicals that are shown to be endocrine disruptors,
Yeah.
disruptors, or carcinogenic.
So this is really interesting, because we hear a lot about it, and we read a lot in the media about all these things, and in petri dishes they do disrupt estrogen, and in rats, but we have no data in women. And we have a lot of other things, like soy, for example, has been shown to cause cancer in rats and cause it to spread, but in women it decreases the spread and decreases it. So we're not rats.
Right.
So we really need research on these things in women to figure this out. And we're in the Army of Women are going to be, at about the first of the year, launching the Health of Women study, where we're going to track people over time with online questionnaires. So every 3 or 4 months you'll get a questionnaire. It'll take you about 15 minutes. You'll fill it out, and then we'll track you. So we're going to ask people what personal care products they use. We're going to ask them about these different chemicals, and then we'll follow them and see who gets breast cancer and who doesn't. That's one way. The other thing is some research we're doing here at the Dr. Susan Love Research Foundation. Believe it or not, for all the molecular biology that we know about cancer, we hardly know anything about the breast. We're still arguing as to how many holes there are in the nipple, believe it or not. And we don't know what happens in the non-breastfeeding breast. So we know a fair amount about breastfeeding, mostly in cows and goats, but also in women, but not what happens when you're not breastfeeding. So we did a study here where we took caffeine and cimetidine. Cimetidine is a heartburn drug. And in women who are breastfeeding, caffeine gets into your milk within minutes. And cimetidine gets concentrated in your milk. It's one of the drugs that goes up. So we gave it to women who weren't breastfeeding, and we checked their breast fluid every 2 hours for 8 or 10 hours. I was one of the subjects actually for this. We had women who'd been pregnant, who hadn't been pregnant, who'd breastfed, who hadn't breastfed, old, young, and we found out that the caffeine took 8 to 10 hours to get in, and the cimetidine never got in at all. So it was concentrated in breast milk, but when you're not breastfeeding, it doesn't get in. And it makes sense. I mean, making milk is a real specialized thing, that our breasts do. And most of the time, they're just hanging out. And so they don't have all those mechanisms in play. So the question is, how many of these chemicals actually get into the breast? And the answer is, we have no idea. So we're putting together a grant right now for the state of California to try to test to see how many of these chemicals we can find in the breast fluid of women who are not breastfeeding, because we do spend most of our lives not breastfeeding.
Right.
And so are we really being exposed to these things or not? And it's a great question, and an area that really is not very well researched in spite of what you read.
Great.
And that was one of the things that came up yesterday. Somebody asked, what is the criteria to join the Army? And I just wanted to reiterate what you said, is that you're looking for everyone.
Everybody, all ages, all ethnicities. You have to be 18. That's legal.
Okay.
So you have to be 18, and that's it.
Okay.
And men can join the Army of Women. we're not going to change the name. I mean, we women have lived under mankind, and women has the word men in it, so they can be in the army of women, and they can be in the health of women study too. And we're particularly interested in men with breast cancer. So we do want to see them, and men with family histories of breast cancer. But if we don't have the healthy women to compare, the women who don't have breast cancer,
Right.
to compare them to the women who get breast cancer, we're never going to know the answer. So we really need both, and we need all ethnicities, all races, all other medical conditions, because otherwise the data is not going to, count for everybody. The last thing we want is a study but this only applies to white women over 50 who live in, Los Angeles. Well, that's not going to help most of us. So we really need everybody in this study and in these studies so that they're representative and so that the answers will apply to everybody.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.